Knight of the Trinity, ruled Ethiopia from 1915 to 1974. During his 59-year rule, he fought off Italian invaders, other rulers in line for the throne, regional rebellions, multiple coup attempts, and a dozen other challenges to the throne. He was 84 when he finally lost his grip on power. By all means, he had a pretty good run for himself. But this video is not about his rule. That story's already been told in 2 separate videos. Go watch them. Please. Please. My name is Anansi, and let me tell you the story of when Haile Selassie was cancelled by the radical left-wing hate mob. But before that, let me remind you to subscribe and check out my Patreon maybe. It's like $2 for basically all the benefits that are there, and more if you feel like it, but honestly it's chill. I'm poor. Thanks. November 12, 1974, the Derg, a military junta then led by Amon Ondum, arrested Haile Selassie to satisfy the demands of an uprising. Famine instigated by his policies, repression, and economic turmoil caused by oil embargoes had whipped the people up into a rage against his regime, and the junta had used the popular upswell to lean on the levers of power as they sussed out how down the general population was with coups. Turns out, at the time, they were hella down. Haile Selassie spent the next few months of his life under house arrest, and there are claims that he was senile at this point and wasn't even fully aware that he'd been removed from power. The most recent transgression, the famine, was made worse by the fact that his regime had both stopped aid from coming in and downplayed the famine to the foreign public as thousands died. The supreme irony of the situation is that Haile Selassie relied on the military as the main arm of his rule. His suppression of regional rebellions by peasants included bombing his own people, mass killings, and oppression against local nations in a manner some would argue was colonial in nature. Now, that exact military that secured his power would be taking it from him. Guns he'd turned on the Ethiopian people would now be turned on him. Sucks to be that, I guess. Now, this is where things get interesting. Haile Selassie's health at this point and how he died are in pretty contentious debate. Here's what we know. At some point, in August of 1975, Haile Selassie had an operation on his prostate, and after a subsequent examination on the 27th, there were complications and he died. This is just one story, where no one killed him, he just had complications and he died very normal. Another is that he simply died in his bed, found by a valet that way despite seeming fine the night before. He was 84, and a lot of Derg members stuck to this story even though some former members claim the opposite. The last theory, and the one that was accepted by Ethiopian courts after the junta fell, is that the Derg ordered him murdered, and had him strangled in his bed. Allegedly, they met that August in a secret meeting where they officially decided to do the deed. For one, his doctor Asrat Woldeus firmly denies that there were any complications. There are also government documents from the Derg era that show he was killed as an order from Mengistu and other higher-ups. Allegedly, documents from the Derg era. His bones were examined, but no evidence that he was actually murdered could be sussed out from them, so it legitimately is unknown what the truth is, even though a court maintained by a rival government claims to know it. And it's not like they would have done any differently with him anyway, to be honest. Whether or not the 84-year-old emperor was strangled, died of complications from ass surgery, or just died because he was old as hell is less relevant. I don't really care much for emperors, so I'm kinda fine either way, especially since the EPRDF would definitely have done it themselves if they got a chance. What's more important is what came after. See, Haile Selassie's regime ruled brutally. By the end of his reign, Eritrea was fully at war with him because of repression and degradation of their autonomy, students were in full revolt and straight up plotting his overthrow, and the military was also beefing with him. The brutality of his rule left a lot of bad blood to be satisfied. How did the Derg satisfy it? Well, whether he died because he was old or got sent back to spawn the hard way, the Derg handled his burial quite frugally, and with all their anger toward him perfectly captured. They encased his bones in concrete, and then used that particular slab as the foundation right under the office toilet, so that Mengistu and the Derg could on that career every single day.
And I started thinking to myself, man, what did he do to make the that mad?
Eventually, the bones would be found. In 1992, a year after the Derg fell, his bones were found by an excavation team and reburied at Holy Trinity Cathedral in Addis Ababa on November 5, 2000. The government that took over after the Derg, a coalition party made up of multiple national liberation fronts from various parts of Ethiopia, didn't really like Haile Selassie either. While they allowed the reburial to take place, they refused to declare an official imperial funeral. The reaction to Haile Selassie's death is a complex milieu of opinions. Some rightfully despise the emperor, remembering the repression and lack of freedoms, massive class disparities, and famines that his rule saw. Some, having lived through the ensuing violence of the civil war between the Derg, EPRP, EDU, and TPLF and various other armed groups in Ethiopia, as well as modern continuations of that violence, look back and miss the emperor's rule, finding themselves nostalgic for a time that, compared to now, feels, but wasn't necessarily more, stable. Rastafarians, the Abrahamic religious sect that venerated Haile Selassie as a living god and descendant of Solomon, but never experienced his rule, also lamented his murder. Anti-communist sentiments among Ethiopians and Rastas almost always include pro-monarchist nostalgia and resentment toward the communists who killed him. Some Rastas even went so far as to claim he wasn't actually dead. Either way, the Derg saw to a swift end for his controversial rule. Love them or hate them, being able to claim to have annihilated the lineage of Solomon is insane clout to wield for Ethiopian communists and anti-monarchists. Which is part of the reason why I feel like maybe they didn't kill him, because to be honest, I feel like if I were Mengistu or any of the other members of the Derg, the other leaders of the Derg, I would 100% tell everybody I killed Haile Selassie. I would wear a shirt that says I strangled that fool all the time. There is no reason at all that I can think of that they would not claim that clout. Can you imagine the clout you would have on the international left if you just came out and said, yeah, I straight up murdered an emperor? Come on. I feel like he really was just old, and he just died because he was old as balls. Because truly, I wouldn't lie about it. I would tell everybody. If I killed Haile Selassie, I would never shut the hell up about it. Which is how you know it definitely wasn't me. Maybe. If you're like me though, you find this entire story hilarious. The sheer pettiness of burying this man's bones beneath your toilet. The drama. The story of the Ethiopian Revolution is a long and tragic one, and this story feels almost too ridiculous to even be a real part of it, so I definitely felt like it needed its own moment to be acknowledged. The moral of the story is, don't be a tyrant or a bunch of communists are gonna attach your bones to their bidet. Also, check out this mildly horny description of Haile Selassie from the New York Times after he died. What helped to make Haile Selassie so physically imposing was his bearded and dark complexioned face, his aquiline nose over full lips, his steady, penetrating black eyes. It was a mien both melancholy and fearsome, the visage of one who was ruled by the precepts of John Stuart Mill, as well as those of Niccolo Machiavelli, by compassion as well as cruelty, for he could be generous to loyal subordinates, or he could hang the rebellious, or he could keep his rival imprisoned in gold chains. Why is that so horny? Is it just me? Am I tripping? Please tell me I'm not crazy. Thank you for watching this video. It got posted on Patreon before anyone else here got to see it, so if you want to support the channel and the artist, meaning me, please check that out. You can get early access to scripts, drafts, poetry, short stories, videos, and more for like $2. Plus, for $5 and up, you get your name in the video credits as well as full collections of my poetry and other benefits. So, consider supporting the channel, and thank you for watching.